topic that I want to cover is actually one article coming from Leonardo Drago. This is from Singapore Business Times. So the topics of the article is the investment longevity, the secret behind Warren Buffett's success. So I think this is quite interesting article. It's just that what caught my attention is not like the overall content. I think the overall content is a good one. It's just that the one that caught my attention is this paragraph here. So this is the article. This is the paragraph that I want to go into. Because I think this article, right, if you read the full content, is basically telling us to diversify. And the reason is because most stocks actually done badly over the course of history. Like for example, like long history, like 90 years, 100 years. This paragraph that I want to focus on is this one, right? So I quote here. At the charity dinner last month, the investor seated next to me gave a long soliloquy about his investment outlook and his portfolio, concluding with the proclamations that every investor should be all in on technology and artificial intelligence and have no less than 50% of their portfolio in NVIDIA. He was surprised that I did not ask any questions and finally asked me what I thought. Good luck. NVIDIA may not exist 20 years from now, so you better have an exit plan if things don't go the way you expect. I replied. I want the highest returns possible, don't you? He asked. No, I don't want the highest returns possible. I want the best return that can be sustained for the longest period of time. I added, half of all stocks eventually go bankrupt. 96% outperform cash. By investing this way, you are making a long-term bet based on what we see now, that NVIDIA is in the special 4% category of all stocks in history. You may well be right, but the odds are starkly against you. The most interesting statistics here is this 96% outperform cash. So think about, like, let's say we go back to 100 years ago, right? So there are so many stocks around. Imagine you pick the stocks that you think will work out well. But imagine that over long course of period, right? Just 4% of the stocks that will actually do better than cash. So if we just read this, it sounds very interesting, very questionable also. Like how can it be, right? If that's the case, why not we just put our money in like treasury bill and just invest in cash? Because if you invest in stocks, 96% actually done even worse. So, but I just want to highlight these things, right? Actually, when the author, when he wrote this, I read the sentence, I roughly know where it came from, right? I know the source because I read that book where this information was extracted from. This is the book from Jeremy Siegel. And then I go and read again the paragraph that make this statement, right? So this is the one. I quote that statement from Jeremy Siegel's book. But actually, Jeremy also quoted from someone else. So let me read it up for you. While a slight majority, 50.8% of single stock strategies generate a positive 90-year returns, the median 90-year returns is only 9.5% compared to a buy and hold return on treasury bills of 1,928%. Only 27.5% of single stock strategies produce an accumulated 90-year return greater than 1 month treasury bill. That is, the data indicates that in the long term, defined here as 90 years for which CRSP and treasury bill returns are available, only about 1/4 of individual stocks outperform treasuries. Further, only 4% of single stock strategies produce an accumulated returns greater than the value weighted market. So I think hopefully by now you know what's the problem with the origin of this quote from the article, right? It says that only 4% of all stocks outperform cash, but actually it's not true because if you read this paragraph, right, actually only 27.5% of single stock strategy outperform cash. The 4% is not outperform cash. The 4% is actually saying that only 4% of the stocks outperform the index return or so-called average stock market returns. So I think we need to get it right because I think that's why we need to read all these books, right? Because sometimes even reputable person wrote an article, you just read the article, you will thought that, okay, there's some, truth to it, right? But you have to go down to the underlying source and maybe even read the original paper, which is written by this guy, Henrik Bessenbinder. He produced this data on individual stocks and also he updated the paper. So there's a paper that's updated based on data up to year end 2023. So I think that's quite nice. If you have time, you can read those papers. And then this is actually pulled out from the paper from Henrik. I mean, there's this section in the book that talk about the best performing stocks in the stock market. So talking about the best performing stocks, right? Actually, you would thought that the best performing stocks for over, let's say, 90 years is companies like Amazon, NVIDIA, these kind of companies, right? Actually, the answer is no, because most of these tech companies, right, they don't have 90 years of historical data. That's why if you look at the best performance stocks, judging by the total percentage increase, right, is actually a company called Altria Group. It used to be called Philip Morris, which is the tobacco company. So the reason it can accumulate in terms of the share price can go up so much, right? This is, don't know, like 2.6 million, right? $1 invested become 2.6 million is because they have 98 years of data to compound. So even the annualized compound return is only 16.3%. But if you compound that over 98 years, from $1 can become 2.6 million. So this is definitely impressive. But if you talk about like the best performing stocks in terms of just the CAGR, right, the annualized compound returns, actually the highest one is still Nvidia, because the stock has been performing so well in the recent years, and you can see that it is like 33%. But this track record is only 25 years. The question is that can companies like this, right, like Nvidia, continue to compound for another 75 years? That's quite questionable. That's why I think the point of the author is to say that if you choose companies, it's not just about the CAGR, it's also about like how long it can sustain decent rate of CAGR. Even let's say if you can choose a companies that just compound at 15%, right? If you can do that for like 10, 20, 30 years, it's still a very respectable gains. I think that's basically that article about. So I think the takeaway, right, is that for stock markets, right, if you look at individual stocks, I know our group here, we all talk about individual stocks. We are passionate about individual stock investing, right? We wanted to believe that companies that we like, right? Say for example, Nvidia is one of the companies in my stock portfolio. I still have Apple, Amazon, other, let's say like tech companies, right? I believe that these companies will do well over next 10, 20, 30 years, right? That's my belief. Although I believe so, but it may not be necessarily true, because if you study the history, you can see that, let's say, just don't talk about like, let's say 100 years, right? Even if you just look at like 10, 20, 30 years, there are still quite a number of companies that from those that are very small, they can, like be very successful and then rise to the top. And then there's also companies that used to be like doing super well, and then they just deteriorate and then come down and then just, fail to survive and bankrupt. So that's quite common in stock market. So, and then for those who run quantitative study on all these stocks, right, you will notice that the stock market returns, right, is not something like a normal distributions, meaning that you have like average and then both the skewed to the right and skewed to the left are symmetrical. It is not the case. It is quite skewed to the right, meaning that the skew is a positive skew. Positive skew means that there are a small number of companies that have done well and super well, and it's actually increased the average stock market just coming from that handful of stocks. So you can think about like, let's say if you invest in the last 10 or 20 years, if your stock portfolio have companies like Nvidia, Platinum Publishing Corp, Netflix, Amazon, Exxon, you have these companies, right? And each of these companies, let's say for Nvidia, $1 invested for that 25 years become 1,300. That's like 1,000x, right? In the case of, let's say, Netflix, 400x, Amazon, 1,500x. So you only need to have a few of these, let's say one or two companies like this, your portfolio will have done well. The problem is that it is not that easy to pick these companies, because let's say just go back to 5 years ago, nobody talked about Nvidia. People only started to talk about it after the share price shoot up, right? And you are buying it at, let's call it like 1,300 times higher compared to 25 years ago. So that's why it is not easy to pick those will generate 100, 250, 100x returns if you pick companies. By picking, I mean you pick really like, let's say 10, 20, 30 stocks, right? If you pick, let's say 1,000 stocks, that's not stock picking, that's really indexing already. So I think the guaranteed way to have exposure to the top performing stocks, right, is really just indexing, meaning that you buy the entire stock market. So you definitely have exposure. It's just that your exposure is very, very tiny, but still you're able to capture the winners. So I think that's the magic or the beauty of indexing or the power of diversifications. To try to convince you a little bit on like these skewness things, right? Inside this book, I think I quoted from the same paragraph, is that this is the illustration. Imagine, right, you pick randomly, or you pick your favorite companies, right? Could be anyone, could be Tesla, could be Nvidia, anyone. Let's say it started out with $100 stock price, and then there's only two possible outcomes: either go up 10% or go down 10%. So symmetry. So on average, it's like zero, okay? So, and then we are only looking at a very simplified example where there's only two time period. Okay, first step and then second step. So start from T0, you have like $100 invested, right? So there are two possible outcomes. You either leads to 10% returns, or drop by 10%. So it will be worth $90. So this is the first period, right? Then second period, repeat the same thing again. Let's say from 110, it go up another 10%. Now this stock is like $121. So basically you get 21% returns, right? Over this 2 period. Then if it go up, then down, then you end up with $99. Because from 110, you just minus 10%, you get $99. Or down, then up from 90 will become 99, right? So you end up at the same place. Or down, meaning that 10% loss, 10% loss. So you end up with $81, which is 19% returns. So just look at this outcome. Of course, if you pick the right one, let's say it just go up twice, you get 21% returns. 10% compounded, right? You get additional that 1%. But the up down and the down up, actually you are losing 1%. So, and then the other one is negative 19%. Pay attention to this, right? Because instead of like just 50-50, just now we say the assumptions is all like plus minus 10%, right? By right, you would think that, okay, then average should be 0, right? That's the average. But look at this outcome, right? Actually, 75% or 3/4 of the chances, right, is that you will underperform the market, which is the market just, like plus and minus 10% is 0. So you have both this 1% and negative 19%, these are all underperform the 0%, right? Only 1 out of 4 scenarios that you will outperform. This is the dynamics of the stock market, right? Because imagine this is just 2 steps. In stock markets, you have like thousands of stocks and then you have multiple periods. It's just that once you chain together all these different periods, you will notice that actually it will tend to underperform the stock index because it is not that easy to capture this top performance stock. I think the key takeaway is that if you are not 100% sure the companies that you pick is the one that is the special one that can give you like high returns, if you don't have that kind of convictions, I think just come back to indexing, just buy, like ETF, passive ETF, get as wide exposure as you can. For example, like buy ETF, right? VWRA or CSPX, like S&P 500, right? So I think that's the method that can help you maximize your chance of success. So I think that's all about today's sharing. I'll keep the video short. Thank you for watching.